All right, well, thank you for joining this breakout room. My name is James Rutter. I work for Haystack Mountain School of Crafts here in Deer Isle, Maine. And today I want to talk about how we utilize craft and the arts into digital fabrication and how this is a really powerful context for engaging students in education, but I'll give some background in terms of craft in general and some of the intersections between Fab Lab and craft. So just a quick note about me and my background. I started off in this world in electrical engineering school and quickly deviated once I graduated and kind of intersected with Fab Labs. I got my first job out of school working for a makerspace and Fab Lab in Providence, Rhode Island called AS220, and was part of the first couple of iterations of Fab Academy and worked closely with the group there. Got my sort of, kind of intersected with the Center for Bits and Atoms and this world, and just, can't stay away. So after I worked there for a number of years, I decided to go back to school and focus on education in general. I was really interested in how Fab Labs can inform and potentially augment some of our classroom and classroom experiences and the curriculum. So I worked in Charlottesville, Virginia with the local school district there, integrating Fab Labs into the schools, and developed a number of programs that we piloted and conducted research on. So I'm happy to talk about any of those things as well. I'm going to set aside some time for hopefully a dialogue and not have this be too one-sided. But anyway, so yeah, I currently find myself here at Haystack, which I'll explain next. And the kind of formula that we're going to go through is craft, digital fabrication, and then education. So I want to start off explaining a little bit about where we're the context of Haystack and how we sort of ended up here and how I ended up speaking to you now, and then hopefully talk about what we're doing. So Haystack is this art institute that's kind of situated in kind of this rural location off the coast of Maine, and we're kind of tucked into a forest on the coast. And our campus is about 80 acres, and it's kind of hidden beneath the forest. So it's a very beautiful landscape with both the ocean and the forest, and it's a very inspiring place to work as an artist or as a visiting maker. Or a student. So you can see here's another view that looks out from the main deck when you visit. You can see out into the bay, and the two buildings that you see are part of our craft studios. And one thing of note is the architecture has been sort of recognized and received awards, both for its remarkable efficiency and simplicity, but also for the aesthetic and the architect, put a lot of things, into the design here to fit into the environment. And much of the campus is actually connected to this deck that you see. So you can kind of walk around the campus on this deck. And so this map kind of shows you just exactly how remote we are. If you're not familiar with our geography here, this is about mid-coast Maine, and the arrow is pointing kind of to this island chain that is connected through a series of land bridges. And so there's this beautiful drive if you ever come here down this peninsula, and you go over a series of bridges to get to this little circle here where we are. So it's a blessing and a curse where we are. It can take a lot of energy to get here, but it's definitely worth the trip once you arrive. And just kind of in summary about Haystack, we are primarily, like I said, a craft organization, and so We have studios in clay, wood, graphics, metals, fibers, glass, and blacksmithing. And we've existed for almost, or we just celebrated our 70th anniversary. So we've been established for a while now. And we primarily run residential programs. And so people come here and they stay for about 2 weeks, but we run shorter programs, and we have a dining hall, and we have dormitories and housing for people to stay in. And so people can come and take a workshop in any one of those disciplines. And we also have residency programs for artists, community programs that much of which is related to the Fab Lab work that we're doing. And then recently we've launched a series of online programs. And so some of this work that you're seeing in this slide just kind of shows you the photo on the right is in our what we call our hot shop, but it's our kind of blacksmithing shop or our glass blowing shop where people are working at really these high temperatures. And so it's kind of set away from all the flammable things, and it's filled with lots of concrete and fireproof materials. And then on the left is some woodworking project that I'm not exactly entirely sure what it is, but Haystack is, I think, always positioned itself to be on the leading edge of craft, and we're not always trying to stay in the past with kind of tradition, but we're using traditional craft processes to engage with kind of contemporary sort of practices. And so this is kind of leads me into talking about the Fab Lab and why it made sense for Haystack to embrace the Fab Lab as part of our kind of mission to be kind of a research institute and keep our eyes on the future of craft. Go. My computer's just stalling out. All right, so then we get to the digital fabrication piece of this equation. And in the campus, kind of off the actual main part of the campus, we have a dedicated facility that houses all the Fab Lab equipment. And it was established, this building was built and established as a Fab Lab in 2011. So about 10 years now. But in 2010, Neil Gershenfeld and our previous director, Stu Kessenbaum, crossed paths, and the CVA came up with a group of students and kind of did a pop-up Fab Lab, and quickly sort of took over, or at least the attention of many of the students, and was greeted with both skepticism and fear, but also excitement and interest. And so there was this beautiful contrast between the people wondering, what the hell is all this stuff? And, we're a craft school, and, why are there robots here? So it was kind of this nice moment in our history. And soon after, it's been fully embraced, and it's become an integral part about our programs. And so we don't actually run, dedicated, sort of 2-week long residential style workshops out of the Fab Lab. Rather, the Fab Lab serves as a resource to all of those other programs that I was just talking about. So if you're coming to Haystack to learn about blacksmithing or metalsmithing or whatever, you would have access to the Fab Lab to augment or to incorporate into your workshop. And so we work closely with our faculty, who we invite up to figure out and think about how to integrate this in. And so that creates this conversation between the craft and the technology. And it kind of leads me into, a program that we run that will make sense in a second. But as you can see, we kind of have what you would typically find in a Fab Lab, your normal kind of inventory of machines. We recently got a plasma cutter, which is located in our blacksmithing studio. But this photo gives you a sense of what you may see when you walk in during the summer. We usually bring in studios and their faculty to come in and get oriented. And usually there's a lot of demonstrations and a lot of discussions about what's possible. And the wonderful thing about working with artists is that they like to ask questions, and they like to they have no they don't have any background knowledge about what the limits are of these machines. So they'll just ask, like, can we put a piece of bread in the laser cutter and engrave it? Or, I found this thing outside, and can we CNC route it? So it's this wonderful opportunity just to challenge some of the assumptions you may have about the machines and what you can do with projects, and see this from a different perspective. And so this person who's wearing the black shirt and looks like they're explaining to people how everything works, these people are integral to this whole process of connecting with the campus. We have transitioned, or we refer to them as residents. They, I think, previously were called technicians or gurus, but we've kind of settled for now on the term Fab Lab residents. And so these are people from possibly like people like yourselves, people from around the Fab Lab network. We invite 12 people a year to come during one of our sessions and attend as basically an expert in the digital fabrication piece to help inform some of the other programs. And so this creates this dialogue between the faculty, let's say in metals or in wood, and then the person in the Fab Lab. They start talking about what's possible. They start experimenting, and then that kind of trickles down into the workshop and helps inform some of the student projects. And so Fab Lab residents play this really critical role in terms of our integration. And historically, at the start of our existence, they were grad students from the Center for Bits and Atoms, but we have since broadened that to include Fab Academy graduates and just people that are working in spaces like this. And so I'm always looking to connect with new people and kind of diversify and provide opportunities to invite people to work in a Fab Lab that's like in the middle of nowhere in this beautiful location, which can in and of itself be like kind of like an inspiring experience. And so anyways, I'm happy to chat more about that. If you have questions about that, I'm sure like lots of you are qualified to like come here and help out in our Fab Lab. So next, I just kind of want to walk you through and paint a picture of like what typically happens, especially when we're talking about craft and Fab Lab. And this picture really, I think, captures like this wonderful story of the intersection, where oftentimes the final product, the output of an artist or of a workshop, bears no kind of resemblance to something made in a Fab Lab, or you would otherwise not see any kind of hints that this was done using a Fab Lab. And ironically, that's some of the more successful projects that we've engaged with, is like where we're playing kind of a supportive role in the background. And so this purple device that you see was kind of created and designed by this student who was just interested in 3D printing these little wire bending jigs. She then took it back to her studio, and then within the hour, I had just a wave of students rushing into the Fab Lab to print these things. And so this often is the story that happens at Haystack, where somebody invents or designs this tool or jig, and then people see it, and that idea just spreads really quickly, and it gets people thinking. And so there's this wonderful intimate experience that happens here, where people are eating together, spending lots of time together, and just kind of sharing what they did during the day. And as a result, things just quickly spread throughout campus, and you get these wonderful projects that emerge. And then that information, most of the times people are very generous with their knowledge and with their information. We very much have an open source ethos to us. And so this person wasn't, sensitive to the fact that they just came up with this design. They were happy to spread it and share the design with people. And so that made for like this wonderful, addition to the program. So I'll just cycle through this a little bit quicker, but again, the final products here, this is all done in the metal smithing studio. We're 3D printing or laser engraving forms to press metal into. And so we have this wonderful hydraulic press that just basically smashes metal into objects. And so it's a fantastic machine to use. And when you pair it with, the precision and the power of some of these tools like the laser cutter, you can get kind of interesting results that would be too time consuming to do by hand, or just not, you can replicate it over and over again. So this next project is another interesting example where both, you kind of are straddling the line between the actual project made by the artist did end up in the final kind of display or portfolio. And so you have this kind of armature that is holding lenses, and these lenses were used to expose what's called a cyanotype print using an emulsion material and paper or fabric. And so you get these prints that you see on the right-hand side using this contraption. And so the artist ended up the device itself is very curious looking, and it's kind of an interesting conversation there. So more commonly, and maybe slightly more pedestrian, is just, stamp making, engraving. It's kind of a workhorse in clay, but, engraving linoleum, these linoleum plates that you see here on the left. These are easily engraved and then pressed into clay. And so we'll usually get a wave of potters or people in the ceramic studio asking to do this. And then we've experimented with different materials and sort of the limits of how far you can do this. And one of our high school interns helped out an artist, and she ended up, engraving and imprinting him forever into this clay mug here. So there's some fun stuff you can do there. Apologies, my computer's a little slow. Here we go. All right, so wood, obviously, this is more probably, typical or familiar looking, where you have this laser cut joinery and this particular person's, model making and exploring some different forms and taking advantage of the precision and scale that the laser cutter can work at. And so obviously this is like why we all love the laser cutter, is because it can do this delicate cutting work with, robust materials like wood and MDF. So that kind of just at least hopefully paints a little bit more of a picture of what goes on between the kind of the studios and the Fab Lab. And so next I want to just kind of dive more into our educational initiatives and kind of where we're taking both the craft and the fab and then kind of putting that into the classroom or some of our informal education programs. So time check. I think I'm good on time. So I want to reserve some time for conversation. So yes. One of the things that I'm most excited about, and actually before I jump into this, just I guess feel free to use the chat. If you think of a question, I'll definitely respond to it in real time if it's relevant to what I'm talking about. So anyways, yeah, internship programs, nothing like sort of reinvented here, but I want to just like reiterate and just state the importance of how Fab Labs are just such powerful internship, or they have the potential to provide such powerful internship programs. And so we run a 12-week summer program that's paid. And the one thing I didn't explain about our community here is that we are in a very economically challenged part of the country. It's both contrasted with extreme wealth from the seasonal people that like to live on the coast, But then the people that actually stay here live year round. There's a huge fishing industry. There's a strong sort of trades community, and then there's kind of related tourism. But this kind of community is challenged with job opportunities, educational attainment, and so we felt very strongly that such a program needed to be paid. That was kind of like a requirement, and it needed to be also a sort of respectable wage in comparison to kind of like the local industry, so that we're not losing kids to go fishing on a boat where they can make lots of money. And so I think it's important to just place value in these programs and find ways to support and fund these, which I'm happy to talk about kind of models for support. But I think there's something very powerful when you treat this like almost close to a job. And so because of that, we rely a lot on our interns. And obviously all the photos that you're seeing is like in the pre-COVID days, but this coming summer, we expect to be, back to at least some operating capacity, where our interns are basically our kind of front lines of tech support at the lab. So if you're attending Haystack and you are taking a workshop and you know nothing about the Fab Lab, but you know that you want to use it, you'll be greeted and you'll work with one of our high school students who has been training all summer with myself or somebody else, and has been learning, the basics. And so they can handle, I would argue, 80% of your kind of, foundational Fab Lab knowledge, right? So like, what is a vector? How do I take my sketch on paper and get it to cut a pattern on a laser cutter? And so that's like, for people that are new to this world, that's like 80% of the stuff that comes through. The high level stuff, the stuff that's complicated, the stuff that's like, can we laser engrave a piece of bread or this like mushroom that I found in the forest? That's where the Fab Lab residents come in, and they handle that 20% complex stuff. And we get to utilize this expert who may have a certain skill set that they're bringing to that overall, summer program. And so the interns play this supporting role. They interact with the residents and the rest of the school. So there's this wonderful synergy between that program there. The internship program kind of led us into this community project that I'm gonna play a brief video of it, and then I'll just continue talking about it. But a lot of other Fab Labs were doing this at the start of the pandemic. The supply chains were strained and there was a PPE shortage in many communities. And so we quickly just started manufacturing face shields. And so this was all during the school year, and we don't typically have an internship program in the school year, but the kids were at home learning remotely, and struggling with that reality. And so we just brought them into the lab and hired them to produce this stuff. And so I'm going to skip over me talking in this video and just play you a snippet of the interns talking about how this impacted their life, which I think is pretty powerful. Something to help out hundreds of individual pieces of plastic by hand. So we synced up and we just started laser cutting. We quickly realized like we needed help, and we're like, let's bring in the interns to help out.
And then when I came in, it was just like full swing production mode. We had tons of local orders. I actually brought a 3D printer home, and it was sitting on my dining room table, and I was just like, taught my family how to press start, so that way if whoever woke up early could press start, and whoever went to bed the latest could press start.
The Fab Lab gave me an opportunity to work with all sorts of machines, including a 3D printer, and that's what sort of got me into it. And now I love it here. That's all I can say. You get to do so much. You're always occupied. You're never bored here. And the PPE project that we did made me feel like I was making a difference. I was helping my community out and helping to stop the spread of COVID-19. We've done a lot of things that here in the Fab Lab that make me feel like I'm a part of the community.
being a part of helping people is always a good thing, and kind of doing your part.
So yeah, that last segment, I think where both Riley and McKenna just talk about, you know, how they felt connected to the community and how this played a role in, you know, kind of motivating them and making them feel, you know, just good about the work that they were doing. I think, you know, this to me was kind of a moment in, I was rethinking how we would approach our internship program, in that we need to replicate this, not the pandemic, but the actual alignment of a Fab Lab to a community, and just getting to see the actual value and connection with our community. And so moving forward, we've kind of started to identify a number of community initiatives that the Fab Lab can directly support, and our interns are just getting kind of injected or integrated into that. So question is this technology, do they have access in the school? And so the answer is kind of like no, but sort of through our partnership. And so the local school here is really strapped for resources, and this is actually a great segue into kind of our next main area of our community work, which is working with the local school systems directly to bring this technology into the schools. So again, if you're like, for us, we're an independent makerspace Fab Lab, and we can pivot quickly. We can kind of, shift about a little bit quicker. And so we can also bring our resources to places that are under-resourced. And so the school here doesn't have any STEM enrichment programs. They don't have a coding course, any of this. So we bring it to the school, or we bring the school to us. And so we are developing partnerships, which I think is another model for other maybe independent Fab Labs near a school that doesn't have this. I think there's opportunities to partner with your local school potentially. And so I think an advantage that we have is because we're so small, I'm only 1 or 2 people away from the decision makers here. That may not be true where you are, but okay. And then I'll answer the professional development question, but just as a quick highlight of our middle school programs, I am also really passionate. A lot of my grad work was in middle school, and I think middle school is this great space, before kids get so busy with sports and other things in high school. Middle school is where a lot of your identity comes online, and your self-efficacy of like, I'm good at science, or I'm a designer. So a lot of these things are just starting to bud in middle school. And so it is an opportunity to really, make an impact that can kind of sustain through high school. And so a lot of our kind of introductory work in the classroom is done in middle school. That way it's integrated into the science class, and every year for, 1 or 2 weeks each year, we make sure that all students in the school just, get some kind of experience with this. It's not going to be, as full blown as the high school internship program, but it's usually, a small project that gets them excited about this. And I think that's where craft, plays its role in getting kids excited, and usually adding some lightness, especially, at least right now with a lot of morale being so low in schools. Doing projects like this can just kind of, get kids that have their head down and feel frustrated with school. It gets them to light up and engage in a different way. And so I know that's just anecdotal, but I'm sure a lot of other teachers that have experienced this might be able to echo that. But anyways, so what we typically do with in-school stuff is we'd like to do 2 projects within a workshop. One of those projects is kind of like the hook, or there's some kind of like personally motivating reason, right? Middle school students are they're like no other animal out there. And so they need to be kind of incentivized to continue on. And so they need some skin in the game. So we usually give some kind of personal fun project, and then we do some kind of collaborative give back, right, to the school. And so this particular case, the school has a nature trail. They wanted to make an educational mural for the school to explain all the different life and animals found along the trail. And so we made this laser cut mural. If we had started out saying you have to make this really cool laser cut mural, but oh, by the way, you're not taking it home, you're going to install it in the school, there might be a slightly more resistance, there might be a little bit less buy-in from the students. And so we like to kind of pair those two ideas up together. And then just to circle back to somebody's question about professional development. So this teacher right here, we've worked with, we have a long-standing relationship, and building relationships is like key to this all of this work is, you really need to, build trust and build relationships with your local teachers. If you're like me, I'm kind of like an outsider when it comes to education. I'm in an independent space. I'm trying to go into a school. We are in an area where it's welcomed, right? It's needed. And so the teachers are like, please come and do stuff, right? But that's not always the case. And sometimes teachers are under a lot of pressure with external things, the realities of being a teacher, testing, and all of those administrative pressures. And so professional development, I think, starts with just building a relationship with your teachers, building that trust, and then starting to layer in some of the technical knowledge, some of the content knowledge of this world. But it takes a while, and what we're trying to figure out now is how to build capacity that doesn't add to a teacher's responsibility, but how can we connect with our community to find people willing to come into the classroom and do this work, so that we're giving the teacher the ability to provide that holistic classroom experience, and maybe do more of the behavioral management, the classroom management, but have an expert, so to speak, come in and do the project. And so this model, I feel like we've been trying to grow a little bit, and I've been trying to train and identify local community members that are, somewhat interested in this, and I try to bring them into the classroom to do this. All right, so we have 10 minutes left. So all of this is like, it's not easy, but it's super fun. That's why I can't get away from this work. So the last program I wanted to highlight is just the potential for after school. And obviously, there's a lot more flexibility when you are outside the classroom. And so we've just launched, it just started last night. And so we have 5 students where, we had 10 register, but there's COVID stuff happening all around the world still. And so we're just, we're up against that. We're up against, just the realities of high school students. But we really feel like this needs to be, in the water, so to speak. We need to try to build a culture of, makers and people that are interested in this. And so both at the middle school level and at the high school level, we also see after school programs as a way to prepare future interns. And so this is happening during the school year. And then we can say, do you want a job this summer? Come work for us at the lab. And so there's this synergistic relationship between these two programs. And just I'll stop talking in a second and just, open it up a little bit more. But, our style is a little bit more informal, semi-structured in terms of, very much inspired by How to Make and Fab Academy, but very pared down and very, just kind of minimal. And, every week they're getting exposed to some new idea, some new topic in a light way. And then they're given opportunity to make some kind of artifact every week. And the goal is that they need to, in the 10 weeks, they come up with some project, and we have a list of 10 community projects or needs that we've identified with local businesses, with kind of our public organizations, like our public health organization and our environmental organization. So they have, getting back to how the PPE project informed our programming, we're trying to, and I definitely, this is an area I'm interested in hearing from other people on, is like how can we, what are successful models of that? Because I know that's been done before. We're not inventing anything new here, but I do think there's something there to work with the community. And so coming up with successful projects and models for supporting that, I think, is a really powerful idea. So that's all the content that I have. I see a couple of questions in the chat that I'll take, but let's see, how do you fund? Okay, so funding is, obviously it's going to vary depending on your situation. And so to paint a picture of our situation, we're a nonprofit, we're an independent nonprofit, so we're not a public agency or a public organization. So that gives us some amount of freedom or autonomy in terms of where we can allocate money and where we can find money. And so it's done through a hybrid of tuition money that comes into the school, there's scholarships that are endowed through historical fundraising efforts. So some of this is like, if you're setting up a new organization, right, there's like planning that the founders of Haystack were really wise to establish, and our directors have done a really good job of being stewards of these endowments and putting them to good use so that we can support programs like this. So unfortunately, there's no like shortcut to like robust, diversified kind of funding, but I'm just trying to paint a picture of like how, if you're in the early stages of developing this program and you have the ability, you do want to think about long-term sustainability. And there's obviously like things like grants, which, I have varying levels of experience from like the kind of federal NSF ones, which are just, there can be overwhelming to even get started or to manage. But then there's like a lot of local, at least here in Maine, we have something called the Maine Community Foundation. We have private foundations, which, these are smaller, bite-sized, but really they can make an enormous impact on covering the cost of running a program. So I would say a lot of our staple community programs are funded by the small private foundations around Maine, and the Maine Community Foundation. And, we do have, larger grant supports, but those are usually to either, kind of launch a new program, establish some new, launch something new. But I think the smaller ones can really be explored for supporting some existing programming and keeping some of this stuff alive. And fortunately, a lot of funders are seeing the light in terms of the value of Fab Labs in this world. And so my experience is that it is very fundable if you kind of know who your kind of regional foundations are. And so anyways, yeah. Not coming from Haystack's not really a college, but it's the school itself does underwrite a lot of our Fab Lab programs. So there is that as well. So it's kind of a hybrid of all those things. And then Sherry asks about standards. And so I think that really, it does depend, which is like, the kind of a cop-out answer. But yeah, so I mean, the standards depend. I have worked with teachers to align to NGSS, which I would say is like the closest thing or the strongest alignment there is. And there's like explicit call out of engineering design standards. And so we have worked with and evaluated on some NGSS standards. That's a little bit more my previous work outside of Haystack, but it's very much in line with the work that we're doing here. Where we're aligning to some standards, and there are, at least where I was in Virginia rolled out computer science standards for I think this was back in 2017 or 2018, and so you are seeing state by state, at least in the U.S., some acknowledgement of these skills and competencies, and so sometimes it is a chicken or the egg thing. There may not be the standards that properly get at the knowledge that you're building in a Fab Lab yet at the state level. And so here in Maine, especially in middle school, it doesn't tend to be a heavily tested grade level, whereas in high school it starts to shift that way. But teachers are obviously that's their world, and so I definitely work with teachers closely on making sure that they're comfortable spending this amount of time on certain content and that we're not taking away from preparing students for the high stakes testing. All right, so how do you ease traditional craft workers into the idea of using?
Sorry, James, we have only 2 minutes, so be quick.
Okay. All right. Thank you. 2 minutes. So the question is how to ease traditional craft workers into the idea of using digital fabrication. So there's not too much convincing you have to do to people, I would say, once they walk into a Fab Lab, and if they are of a previous generation that, you know, didn't grow up with this and is unfamiliar to this, it can be overwhelming to like show them a computer program, and so there's that, which is a real phenomenon that you have to work through. But I would say, and I'll close out with this, but I'm getting back to the interns and the power of high school students. There's something really disarming about a high school student showing you how to do something. There's, you know, something I think really beautiful about pairing somebody that needs help, somebody new to the digital fabrication, with a younger person. I think it's a great match, and it's a great way to support that. And so you can usually meet people where they're at if you kind of just, you know, you know, you just start kind of at the entry level. And I think, you know, the high school students do a great job. So anyways, that's, I think, all we have time for, but thank you all for showing up, and yeah, I appreciate it.